The Outsider podcast shares the opinions and analyses of Drew Landry. They are his thoughts and his thoughts alone, and do not necessarily reflect every member of his audience or newsletter readers. Now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host as always, Drew Landry, and folks, thank you for making this the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the Lone Star State. So however, whenever, and wherever you are listening and or watching, as you can do that on YouTube, please know that I'm incredibly grateful for your attention. In today's episode, I have two items and then a special interview with Mrs. Roxanne Lathan, who's a candidate for the Texas House of Representatives out in East Texas, around Nacogdoches. And so I will get to that interview in just a little bit. But my two items that I have is one about Governor Abbott and his constant flip-flop on his stance on data centers. And my other story has to do with the recent poor choices done by the Attorney General Ken Paxton in his undisciplined campaign for U.S. Senate. But as we look at the issue with Governor Abbott and his constant flip-flopping on data centers, let's understand some aspects here, because the reporting on big data centers invading rural Texas continues, and rightfully so. Earlier in this week, when I am recording this, during this week, there was a city-wide meeting in Lubbock held at the Downtown Convention Center. It was put on by the City Council to see a presentation and for citizens to express their concerns about a large-scale data center potentially coming to the hub city. Now, I wrote a piece for the Lubbock AJ and in the Amarillo Globe News in mid-May that I'm not in favor of these things. Right? I oppose the construction of large-scale data centers, and especially in rural Texas. And here are my reasons. Their community benefits have not been clearly articulated. Nothing has changed my mind to suggest data centers come to rural areas for the vast, cheap land, to avoid city regulations, for the sweetheart deals from Chapter 312, which has to do with property tax abatement for 10 years, and pay no sales tax, which is a 2013 law that Governor Perry signed into effect. And let alone the fact that they will take our water and ramp up our electrical costs. All of these things have been studied. All of these things have been found. There's been research on this. This is nothing new. And nothing has really changed here. But it seems like most Texans agree with that sentiment. There was recent polling from the Texas Politics Project that suggests most respondents in that poll oppose building a data center in their communities. And by most, I mean 56% specifically. Of the poll participants, 42% strongly opposed a data center being built in their communities, while 14% somewhat opposed their construction. So last time I checked here, 42 plus 14 is 56. And so that is a really sound majority to say no thanks. There were, however, those who were in favor of that. All right, and the support for that was well below a third of the respondents, with 20% saying that they somewhat support it and 9% saying they strongly support their construction. The remaining percent, which is about 15 or so, those respondents didn't know what it was, didn't have an opinion on the matter. Now, opposition for data centers has been the strongest from those who live in the suburbs and the rural areas. Again, we're looking right back at that Texas Politics Project poll. 62% of respondents who identified living in the rural areas oppose the construction of data centers. Moreover, a combined 60% of those who identify as living in the suburbs of Texas opposed the construction of data centers. The opposition to the data center movement, folks, is real, is loud, and is clear. And here's the other vital finding. It's bipartisan. According to the same poll, slightly more respondents who identified as Republican oppose data centers built in their communities than they support. You couple this with a resounding majority of Democratic and independent opposition, folks, the message is clear. As of now, Texans across partisan and ideological lines, rural and suburban areas, oppose data centers being built in their communities than they support it. The one who took the biggest note from this, though, was Governor Greg Abbott. After claiming in 2025 that he wanted Texas to be the epicenter of AI development, where companies can pair innovations with expanding energy, along with supporting cryptocurrency mining, and arguing lucrative tax breaks would make the state the mecca of new tech. The governor, after he said all that, the governor did a complete about-face on the issue shortly after the poll was released. And this suggests, it's almost as if you can just clearly tell, but this suggests that he took notice of the rising opposition. Governor Abbott now wants to ban data center construction in, wait for it, rural Texas. Panhandle journalist and also a one-time guest on the show, Suzanne Belsnider, dubbed Governor Abbott's political turnaround as like the John Kerry shuffle. All right, this is in reference to John Kerry's 2004 presidential campaign, where he was for additional funding of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan before he was against it. So, and that makes a little bit of sense. He was for, the thing in principle, but then he was against it, and it's inconsistency, and it was used against him tirelessly in the 2004 campaign. This is Governor Abbott's John Kerry moment. And this is true. And it's also a fair comparison to put with the governor to the former presidential candidate. But the question that everyone misses here is why? Why does the governor, who clearly supported data center construction at one time, now want to ban their construction in rural Texas? Well, to me, the answer is transparent, because it appears to be politics. 2026 is an election year, and look, Governor Abbott needs a very large amount of support living in rural Texas for him. He needs them. He needs them to come out in big numbers if he wants to win an unprecedented fourth term. And I'm of the mind that that's the reason. That's the reason he did this sudden and dramatic about-face. He's for it, now he's against it. And the question is why? Because he wants to win in 2024. I'm sorry, in 2026. He wants to win in this election. And he needs his base, his core set of supporters to come out in big numbers for him. But here's what this change also tells us. Because it makes sense politically. Because Democrats have begun campaigning on data centers in rural areas. And that creates that rare issue where they align with the rural sentiment. I mean, let's just face it here. Public education campaigning out there didn't work. All right. Healthcare options and healthcare issues in the rural areas just didn't work. The minimum wage, ag, all that stuff that affects them day to day didn't work. So what will work, what could possibly be another issue here that could help them bridge this divide, is the data center issue. And we know, we have seen the data that most of those living in the rural areas do not want data centers to be constructed in their areas. Democrats are going out there saying no data centers. Even, again, I've mentioned him before, and I'll mention him again in the interview. Commissioner Sid Miller, he's also against them. So he's being out in front of this. The Democrats are out in front of this, and so that all of that has put pressure on the governor, because if the governor doesn't get his course set out, meaning if his support dwindles, either they vote for the Democrat or they just don't show up, or they skip his race, or whatever the case is. If they are not coming out and voting for him, his winning statewide coalition is at risk. So that's the political gamble here. That's why he did it. It's all politics. It's all elections. All right? So, but just because it makes political sense doesn't mean it makes actual sense. I mean, the governor appears to have abandoned his own moral path for political gain. How else do you explain this entire switch? What other type of reasonable explanation could there be? I mean, the governor's weather vane has changed, and it changed probably for the clear political incentives. But I think it's fair to ask here that there's this looming question. How does he honestly feel about data centers and the construction in the rural areas? Like, what's his honest approach to that? And with that question, we got to follow up. Because is he truly led by his own moral guidance, or does his stance on this change as often as the wind? Is he being John Kerry here? I don't know. Is he being Mitt Romney here? I don't think we'll ever really know that. But the governor has a really good political sense, and his main person, Dave Carney, is telling him all the things to do, and he's really the Wizard of Oz here, and Abbott is just the show. So where does he truly stand on this? I don't think we're ever really going to find out. He just wants to win elections. And I think the Democrats have figured out something, that if they can talk about this and get people excited about this issue of losing their land, of fighting continual headaches and harming their livestock and harming the cattle, and just hurting the entire integrity of rural Texas, their very way of life. And we've seen evidence of this. This isn't like some hyperbolic, made-up scenario. I mean, you can easily go out there to Dickens County and in Lufkin and in any other place that has a big data center that's already been built. You can go out there and you can see the effect that it's having. It's not good. For Democrats to seize that and say, we are opposed to that, you have overlap, and that is something that scares Abbott. Abbott wants to be the longest serving governor in the history of Texas. And that's why he is campaigning the way he is on data centers. Honestly and truthfully, we're never really going to know any of it. I don't know if that's the best thing for it, but that's just really where we are. Now I turn my attention to none other than Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Old cockeyed Ken found himself in hot water yet again as he was caught spending time with his second known mistress, Tracy Doohan, in England during the 4th of July. That's where he was. He goes to Iceland, then he went to the old UK. And that in and of itself is hilarious, because we here in the States, even in West Texas, celebrated independence from Britain, whereas he celebrated in Britain. But the video of this, of him being caught, is even better than that delicious irony. So I'll put a link to the video in the comments, but I guess it's called the show notes. But he's caught walking down the street with Doohan holding his arm, only for him to see that he's being filmed when he forces her, Doohan, to disarm him, and he frantically runs away. Like, he kind of walks away from Doohan and looks at the person filming them, and then he just storms off. And Doohan kind of leans over as if she's like messing with her shoe, or perhaps trying to hide in the middle of the street in her green dress. But he was going to literally leave her in the street while he goes and tries to hide from this person who's filming. I mean, not only is he a cheater, not only is he a crook, but he's also a coward. What a complete coward Ken Paxton is. And let's also understand that this speaks to how undisciplined his campaign is. Who in his campaign thought it would be a good idea for him to go relax in Britain during the 4th of July? Who? And who actually thought that he would not be caught? You see, this is the problem with candidates who are like Ken Paxton, who have kind of eased into their seats all the time. They've always eased into it. Paxton, when he was in the State House and then later in the State Senate, he's always coasted off others' coattails. You know, he's always coasted off that. He's the one leading the ticket. Okay? Like, he can't just magically hope Trump is going to find himself on the ticket again. That's not happening. Trump's not on the ticket. He's leading the ticket. I mean, he did what he wanted to do. He beat John Cornyn. Now he thinks he doesn't have to do anything. He thinks if, that talk radio out here in West Texas and in East Texas, and, like the guy out in Dallas who's apparently a legend, and I've barely heard of him, but that guy's going to do all their campaigning for him. Those nationally syndicated radio shows who talk about this race, they're all going to do the campaigning for him. They're just going to hit the right-leaning voter and all the conservative voters with Tallarico's a freak, and he's a creep, and he's not really a Christian, and all this malarkey. While Ken Paxton is frolicking and philandering with his mistress, again, his second known mistress. I mean, we don't know how many mistresses he's really had. We only know he's had 2. But while he's doing this with his second mistress, he doesn't really think he has to truly campaign. He thinks it's in the bag. That's how undisciplined and how arrogant Paxton has become in this Senate race. Look, Tallarico is already out there knocking on doors and making TV ads. I mean, he's doing something that neither Colin Allred or MJ Hagar or even Beto O'Rourke did. he's going on the attack early. He is spending money that he has just overwhelmingly raised, and is spending it in the big cities. And that's great. Because if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, I mean, that's the definition of insanity. But Paxton is, he's off, in the UK, spending big money with his mistress and being caught and acting like, oh, no, and then, trying to run away as if he's being caught red-handed with something. I'll say this. This is one thing that Ted Cruz did that Paxton will never do. And you've heard me say this before. When Cruz got caught going to Cancun in 2021, when the grid almost collapsed during Valentine's Day, and he was gonna go to Cancun, and he got caught, and then he comes, and then he's asked about it, and he goes, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I really should. I mean, at least he said that. At least he owned up to it. Now, he did later go on to blame his family for it, but at the same time, he actually did say, I shouldn't have done that. Ken Paxton's not going to do this. Ken Paxton is not going to say, I really shouldn't have been in the UK with my mistress. I shouldn't have done it. He's going to blame like the people who filmed him. Well, these nosy people won't leave me alone. What? Huh? Like the guy who was going to deliver some papers to him because he was going to be subpoenaed, and he ran out the back door and drove away so he wouldn't be served with papers. He blamed the guy who was going to serve him. Well, he's been walking. He was around my house too long. I got scared. What? This is why Kim Paxton is an arrogant coward, a chicken hawk. Talks tough, but when push comes to shove, he ain't nothing but a cream puff. And there was a back channel conversation that I was made aware of, where one particular supporter who wanted Cornyn to win said Paxton is arrogant and doesn't have what it takes to beat Tallarico. That was a Republican who's an elected official in Texas who said that. Now, I'm not going to name names. I don't have the liberty of doing that. But let me just tell you, it was a diehard Cornyn supporter. But what's interesting here is we won't hear Kim Paxton say, I shouldn't have done that. Now, if that was the only thing Kim Paxton did, I would then go on to my interview with Roxanne Lathan. But that's not it. Then a story from the Texas Tribune and ProPublica, an investigative report that was released this past Tuesday, suggests that Ken Paxton has been committing voter fraud for the last 6 elections. And what's the GOP said about this? What's Trump said about this? What's Paxton said about this? Nothing. They have gone radio silent. And I have the story here for you, and I'm going to read some excerpts of it because it needs to be brought to people's attention. And reading from the very, very start here, it says, 2 weeks before this year's primary elections, Texas Attorney General Kim Paxton announced the creation of a tip line for the public to report people or groups suspected of voter fraud. Free and fair elections are a cornerstone of a thriving republic, and with the authority granted to my office by the legislature, we will stop at nothing to uncover and stop any illegal voting activity, Paxton said in a February news release announcing this tip line. The announcement linked to guidance from his office about election laws in Texas, which included a requirement to be a U.S. citizen, a prohibition on collecting mail ballots on behalf of others, warning that it's illegal to misrepresent your residence on election records or to establish a residence for purpose of influencing the outcome of an election. You must register to vote using the address where you reside, the Attorney General's own guidance stated. Despite his own warnings, Paxton appears to have used an address where he did not live while voting in 6 elections in the past 2 years, including in May's runoff that made him the Republican nominee for U.S. Senator, according to records that were obtained by ProPublica and the Texas Tribune. State Senator Angela Paxton said in a 2025 divorce filing that Paxton, whom she accused of adultery, moved out of their Collin County home a year ago. Well, a year prior to this, since 2024. But Paxton continues to list the home's address in the northern Dallas suburb as his voter registration. Angela Paxton, who was asked to be interviewed for the story, didn't. A source close to the Paxton said Attorney General has not moved back into the home since he left in 2024. It's unclear where Paxton has lived for the past 2 years, but reporting from ProPublica and the Tribune has linked him to a home in neighboring Denton County since February. Wow. 3 election lawyers told the news organization that Paxton may have violated the same Texas laws his office cautioned about in his news release. ProPublica and the Tribune reached out to Paxton's campaign on June 3rd, the 15th, and the 25th, and asking why he remained registered to vote in Collin County when he appeared to no longer live there, and about his connection to the Denton County property. A reporter left a voicemail on his personal cell phone on June 25th. News organization sent his government office and campaign staff an email on Monday with a detailed list of questions, including a request for Paxton's response to the election lawyer's belief he may have violated things. Paxton and his office did not reply until Monday's email. Campaign spokesperson Madison Cersei, I think that's how you say her name, or Kersey. Let's go with Cersei. Sounds like Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones. Did not answer. She did not answer the questions from the news organizations, and says she issued a statement saying that the Attorney General has been a national leader on election integrity with a long record of defending Texas elections. Cersei said that attempting to insinuate otherwise and tear him down with a baseless, lie-filled tabloid story is not real reporting. Asked twice to provide specifics about where they believed was inaccurate, the campaign did not respond. Of course not. Then it goes into what some of these particular problems, what the punishments are for doing this. State courts have repeatedly ruled that there is no single way to determine where someone lives, and judges may consider multiple factors, such as where a voter sleeps or stores personal belongings. Prosecuting such cases also require proof that a voter knowingly and intentionally broke the law. Even if it's clear that someone doesn't live at the address where they are registered to vote, state law allows them to remain registered if their absence is temporary and they intend to return. The provision is commonly used by college students and military service members. Well, yeah, that makes sense. So as long as you truly intend to return, you're fine, said Beth Stevens, who's an election lawyer who worked for the Harris County Clerk and the Texas Civil Rights Project. When you start doing things that suggest, I've fully moved, I'm just wink wink saying I intend to return, that's when you get into questionable territory, she continued. Paxton's public and contentious split from his wife could make it difficult to argue that he intended to return to the home they own and where she continues to reside, said David Becker, who's a former voting rights lawyer for the DOJ, the Department of Justice. This is his quote. I think there would be questions raised about a residence when someone does not spend the night, and can in no way have the intent to continue to reside. Those would probably raise red flags in any state. Well, he clearly doesn't know anything about Texas. does not raise a red flag here. It raises a green flag. You may go. Here's another good part here. Paxton has advocated for strict enforcement of the state's election fraud law, including in cases against voters. His office allegedly had falsified records about where they lived. This delicious irony. In 2018, the Attorney General's voter fraud unit arrested 9 people on suspicion of using residential addresses where they did not live to vote in a municipal election in Edinburgh, in the state's Rio Grande Valley. County prosecutors acting on behalf of Paxton later dismissed the charges after failing to secure a conviction against the mayoral candidate they alleged had encouraged those voters to register at false addresses. The candidate, who was Richard Molina, said he was innocent and said the prosecution was politically motivated. There's no question about it that it was. State privacy laws allow some politicians and law enforcement officials to shield their voter registration information from public view. Paxton does not do so. His opponent, Democratic State Representative James Talarico, does. Talarico's campaign said he lives and is registered at his North Austin home he purchased in 2022. ProPublica and the Tribune were not able, it should be say unable, were unable to independently confirm this. Paxton's campaign did not raise any issues with Talarico's voter registration. In her statement to ProPublica and the Tribune, however, Cersei said Talarico has actively campaigned against voter security measures and has said he opposes voter identification requirements in a 2021 Fox News interview. Talarico said hundreds of thousands of Texans who don't drive lack a driver's license. He did not directly answer a question about Social Security numbers during that Fox News interview. Talarico campaign did not respond for comment. You don't really need to, because this doesn't really need him to comment. You don't hit the guy when he's falling down. When your opponent is stumbling, fumbling, and tumbling, all you got to do is get out of the way. Paxton's living arrangements, since he's separated from his wife, are not public, but information that was obtained offers some indication where he may have been residing. In mid-February, a trust bought a 5,000 square foot home listed for $2.4 million in a gated community in Denton County, according to the appraisal district and the seller's real estate agent. The trust did not disclose its ownership to Denton County officials. Trusts are not required by law to do that. Paxton shares a separate blind trust with his wife, Angela. They're still not officially divorced yet, that they have used to purchase property and other assets. Going on here, Angela Paxton said through a spokesperson that she has no connection to the Denton County home or the trust that purchased it. Trustee of the Paxton's Trust, family friend Chip Loper, that's a stupid name, Chip, did not respond to questions about the address change. So everyone's talking about it, everyone knows about it, but no one's saying anything about it. They actually, the Trib and the ProPublica sent a reporter out there to the Denton home, knocked on it, no one was there. When the reporter placed a letter for Paxton in the mailbox, an envelope addressed to Warren Paxton, the Attorney General's given name was visible. You're not really supposed to do that, so ProPublica may have violated the law. You're not supposed to put things in the mailbox. Later that week, Paxton appeared on a podcast with Dan Patrick, of all people. And the video from the podcast showed Paxton seated in front of a fireplace with a mantle that were nearly identical to those depicted in the home's online real estate listing. So, yeah, he lives in that house. It's pretty clear. The Daily Mail reported in May that Paxton had moved into Denton County home with Tracy Duhan, whose extramarital affair with Paxton prompted his wife's divorce filing. Daily Mail published a video of Paxton and Duhan that it reported was taken at an airport in Iceland. And the video was quickly seized upon by Talarico. We've all seen that. Paxton is not registered to vote in Denton County. Instead, since February, he has voted in Collin County twice. Once in the March Republican primary, once in the May runoff. So you're seeing here, this is clearly, without question, voter fraud. And at least it would be classified as their set of rules. This is voter fraud. And under that set of lines and stuff, I sent him an email. I said, hey, you may want to look into this, the Attorney General's happenings here in this story. So I sent him a tip. I also made a post on X because 5 years ago, the lieutenant governor was on this bandwagon. He was beating the drum for Trump that 2020 was rigged and all that crap. That he would create this, that if you could prove that voter fraud happened, we're gonna give you some money. Well, what I did was I just retweeted this, I reposted it, and I tagged the lieutenant governor and on both accounts, his personal and his campaign and his official account, and said, "Hey, you still got that fund open? DM me for my address. I'd like a cashier's check, please." But that's just the funny thing about it. They think that this is no big deal. If this was a Democrat doing this, they'd be all over it. I mean, something like this kind of happened. I mean, a voting irregularity happened and it was seized upon in Terry County. One county commissioner, who was the only Democrat on the county commissioner's court, voted in the Republican primary. And so it was Republicans who saw that, and then they tried to kick him out. They tried to say he's disqualified. If a Republican did that, we don't really need to worry about that. It's no big deal. My gosh. But this is just delicious irony. We continue to see that fraud is very much alive. Maybe I need to stop saying that it hardly ever exists. Because here's a clear example of voter fraud happening. And it's happening by the top cop in Texas who seeks to have a promotion. I don't think he really deserves it. Not a good day, not a good start to the week, or really a good week for Ken Paxton. Again, just a complete sloppy candidate with a complete undisciplined, unnatural campaign tactic. He's just not good at it. And he's going to lead your ticket? You want this guy? You got to be kidding me. All right. So folks, let me now that I'm done with that, okay, let's now get to my interview with Mrs. Roxanne Lathan from House District 11, running against the Republican incumbent out there in East Texas. And here's that interview. As promised, joining me on the program is House District candidate for District 11, Roxanne Lathan. Roxanne, thank you so much for joining the Outsider podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about here, what got you into politics? What got you into running for this seat? I'm interested in what that looked like, and what is the reason that you're in this race?
Well, I retired about a year and a half ago. I was a principal here in Nacogdoches for Nacogdoches ISD. And when you're working long hours like that, you don't have the time to really give back to your community like you want to. And so after I retired, I kept looking for something to do to help out. And so I became a volunteer deputy registrar. And then I helped out with an election. And so I was like, okay, this is good. I'm helping to serve my community in that way. But day after day of watching the news and all the horrible things that was going on in our country under this terrible president. And then with his mini-me, Greg Abbott, doing whatever he, asked, then I was just like, something has got to change. Somebody has got to do something. And day after day, I was saying that, it can't get any worse. And it always got worse, as we see right now today also. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to run because I've got to give people a voice here in East Texas. There hasn't been a Democrat on the ballot, and I know over a decade. And so I decided to throw my hat in the race and try and help my community because it's a really poor area, and a lot of the major employers are, like colleges or the school districts, hospitals, chicken plants, things like that. So they're good for our community, but they don't pay a lot of money. And so, there's things we can do to help out our fellow citizens. And right now, Abbott is not doing anything. The state representatives in place now, they're not doing anything to help poor middle class. So, I want to try and help.
Yeah, I think that is wonderful. Your background is in education, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and so you saw this last session and the session before, and probably the session before that, and just the constant attacks on public education. Was that really like the moment where you say, "Okay, enough's enough. I'm getting involved in this House district race"?
Yes, the Republican incumbent, longtime incumbent, he listened to the people in the community, and we were all like, no, we're against the vouchers. So he said, okay, I'm against the vouchers. That really ticked off Greg Abbott. And so he went and found someone who would rubber stamp everything that he wanted. And that person beat out the longtime incumbent, another Republican. And so, of course, we didn't think that was going to happen because so many people loved Travis Clardy, but it happened. I think we all were like, surely there's no way
Yeah.
they're going to take money from public education and give to people who are already doing great. Their kids are already in private schools, but it happened. So, yeah, I was very upset, along with a lot of people here. And then also with this Blue Bonnet curriculum, a lot of teachers are upset about that. I don't like the fact that I feel like districts are held hostage. If you want this money, then you have to use this curriculum. That's not right, but that's what's happening.
Yeah,
So, we've got to stop this.
absolutely. I don't, when when that first came out, I thought, this is like the most watered down aspect of any core idea that we've ever had. And it seems as if we want to talk about the history of the state and the history of this country, and you want to talk it in a real way. Somehow that became woke. Like, have you noticed that?
Yeah, I guess they can't come up with anything else because if you have your eyes open and you understand what's going on in this state, in this nation, and in our state, then I guess they had to find something. What are we going to call it? They're intelligent. We'll call it woke. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having your eyes wide open and being awake to what is going on. So, I guess you can call me woke. That is just absurd.
It's one of these dumb buzzwords that they have just made up here, and it's just like, come on, I like to throw it back at them and say, well, the right is woke with all this blue bonnet stuff and wanting, to have the Bible taught in English classes or in history courses and science, and I'm like, that's a whole different world here that we're about to enter into. And it's good that there are actual educators, people who have a history of educating, a background in that, who want to get involved in this and be a voice for our schools and for our teachers and for faculty and for staff. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that I know a lot of teachers are concerned with is that I don't know of any kids that when you're teaching, they don't ask more questions than what you might have written down that might come up. And if teachers aren't trained theologians, I mean, what are they going to say? Just, hey, you got to ask your parents about that when you get home because they can get in trouble if they say the wrong thing. And if they don't even really understand the Bible themselves or what certain verses mean, the lesson plan might explain it, but again, you don't know what that kid is
Mhm.
going to ask. And so it just opens up too many doors for parents to go and complain to school board members, and teachers are already worried about their jobs because of things that have already happened. It's just a terrible situation.
It really is, and those who are on the front lines of this deserve a lot better than what they have. And I think education is a winning issue, and I think that's something that's even a uniting issue for those in a rural area around Nacogdoches. What's another issue that you've heard about that would be good for your district in your race?
Well, we have a hospital here in Nacogdoches that's been struggling for so long, over a decade, because of very little funding. And right now, tenant is going to take it over. That's supposed to start August 1st, I believe. And then so many other communities have either lost their rural hospital or maybe just the emergency room part stayed open, but the part of the hospital with beds, that's closed. Well, to people, that's closed in the hospital. You might say, no, it's not actually closed, but if you have to tell someone, sorry, you got to go hours on down the road because we don't have a bed to put you in, then in their minds, you have closed that hospital. And so, I heard a podcast a few weeks ago. This guy was saying it's because of Obama or whatever. Well, the Republicans fought Obama so much on the Affordable Care Act where they wanted to make something that could have been really great, not as good because of the stipulations they were putting on it. So Obama gave the states hundreds of millions to expand Medicaid so these rural hospitals will stay open. Well, Greg Abbott said no to taking that money. He said no to expanding Medicaid. And so now we have the problems that we have. But again, they're trying to say it's the Democrats. So we've got to do something to help our rural hospitals. Right now, Greg Abbott there's this whole act, this plan to give like $281 million to help rural hospitals, but that's a little bit too late. And 281 million is not much when you've taken a billion from public education. Come on now, we have the money. So you're still not trying to help the rural hospitals. It just angers me because I live here in this small town. And when you're not getting any younger, you might need to take a trip to the emergency room or might need medical help. And to know that you're going to have to travel to the next biggest city is just very concerning.
It is very concerning and also really disturbing that that's the way things are. I mean, in these rural areas, it may be just that one hospital, as you said. It may not technically be closed, but if you have to drive an hour to get basic care, yeah, that hospital's closed. I couldn't agree more with you on that. And it drives me bonkers, as I'm sure it does you, that they blame the Democrats for it. This is where they need a really good history lesson because the
Yeah.
Democrats have not been in charge of the Texas House since 2001, and they haven't won the governor haven't had a governor in there since Ann Richards. So you know who are you blaming? Why are you blaming them? They're not the party in power in this state. I mean, how frustrating is that for you as a candidate to hear that? Well, it's all your fault.
Yeah. Well, you know that something should make sense to people, but yet they won't look at it that way, or they just put their blinders on because they just want to make sure a Republican stays in office. It is very upsetting. And on some of my social media sites, they're coming after me. Well, to me, it's funny. I don't read those nasty comments talking about Democrats going to hell and everything else and calling me names. I just laugh at that. I'm on the verge of saying your mama, but I'm trying to, not do that. But, I guess they think that they're going to hurt you or make you go in the room and cry. That's not me. Like I told you how I grew up during that time period where, I got tough skin, baby, bring it. I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Being a candidate it is so hard. It is such a difficult thing, especially because it's not just you involved here. You got there's family involved in that. And so these people will say these nasty things and you get in it with a thick skin to begin with. And now you're just like, hey, this is why I got this thick skin. I believe in my campaign. Doesn't matter what you say. It's not going to get me off the tracks here. I think that's so admirable, and I love that about you. Um, so you got public education. There's healthcare. Is there any other? Is there another like a third top issue that you see in your area that needs some sort of attention from the ledge?
Yeah, well, I talked about the major employers here in East Texas. And, there's things that we can do to bring better paying jobs here or just help businesses so that they can pay more. We need to raise the minimum wage. I mean, come on. I remember when I made $4.25, and I was very happy when we went up to $7.25. Isn't that terrible? But I was happy about that. And businesses didn't shutter and run for the hills because we went up in our minimum wage. But I had someone say to me, well, what's going to happen to the businesses? Have you researched this and look at the history? I'm like, what? Do you not know how many states have raised the minimum wage? Florida, you know, Alligator Alcatraz governor cares more about his citizens and have raised the minimum wage. So if he can do it, how come our governor don't care enough about us to make the cost of living go down and help us with earning more money? So that would help people, period, around East Texas, not just East Texas, but the whole state. So, I want to help with the economy and, making sure people make more money.
I think that is wonderful. That is, they like to say, well, if you raise the minimum wage, they're going to have to raise their prices. You mean like they do every year? Uh, I mean, the federal minimum wage has not been raised since like 2007. I mean, we're going on for almost 20 years. And you want to tell me that the prices have stayed the same since 2007? It's just a ridiculous argument that's easily refutable in about 10 seconds. So, but that is such a good point, and that's something that can get people really excited about. Like this person wants to fight for me, wants to fight for my job, and for us workers. How excited are people whenever they hear you say something like that?
Well, the Democrats are, we're all happy about what we're fighting for. But I think some Republicans are coming around also because I have Republican teachers who worked for me in the past who are supporting my campaign. And I know from looking at what's going on with Tallarico, there's a lot of people, even independents, and that's coming over to how we are looking at things. And so I think that's a good sign. We just need more people to pay attention and get those Democrats who haven't voted in a long time, get them out to the polls. And I think they will. I feel like they haven't voted in a while because we haven't had a Democrat on the ballot. At the state levels. And so I'm thinking that they're going to come out. From what I'm hearing, there's a lot of people that's angry about what's going on, and they tell me that they're going to vote. So I've gone around and talked to quite a few people in the Black community when I'm knocking on doors, and I'm hearing some really good things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you like have any like let's say you win your race, you're going to the legislature and is there like one of the first things that you want to introduce as a bill? What would be like the number one thing that you are going to author or perhaps joint author? Have you thought about that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, getting rid of the voucher scam.
Okay.
That would be a top number one. And Gina Hinojosa, who's running for governor, feels the same way. The lieutenant governor candidate, Vicky Goodwin, on down, we all feel the same way. I mean, that has got to be the number one thing because that's just a waste of public school funds.
Yeah. I saw a post today when I'm recording this. It was on X. It was the Governor Hot Wheels account, which that's just
Yeah. Yeah.
odd in and of itself. But he made a point that he's going to bring some sort of a like a board or some sort of blue ribbon board or something, and is going to be of teachers, and he's going to ask them questions, and he's going to listen to them. And I'm like, what? Did this
Ah,
come from the Onion? I mean this. I mean, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. This man has never ever cared as to what teachers have had to say.
no.
You just hear this and you go, "What planet is this? Well, where are you from, man? Where have you been?" You know.
Yeah. Well,
So
I call him Governor Backup Terry, not Hot Wheels. So maybe he might change his name to that. I don't know if you're familiar with Backup Terry, but you need to look that up on YouTube.
okay, okay.
Um, yeah, I mean, you can look at what he's saying about data centers. He was the one who said, "Hey, come on, we're going to be the data center capital of the world," whatever.
Mhm.
And now he's saying, "Yeah, we need to put a pause on this." Now he's coming out against them and saying that he will do something about it, what, in 2027? Well, what, 2027?
Mhm.
You're the governor.
Mhm.
You can put a ban on it right now. You can stop it right now. And he's not
Right.
doing that. So, and then look at property taxes. He's been running on that from the beginning and hasn't done anything to help. And I read the other day where he was coming out with this plan about property taxes. I'm like, dude, just, blow off the dust from your first plan from years ago and just, repeat that because only the MAGA Republicans will believe what he's saying because we know it's not true. It's a bunch of
No.
lies.
No, they've been in power for so long on this that they've run out of ideas, honestly, and they've kind of ran out of energy, and they ought to be ran out of town. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's it's just hilarious to me that that okay, every session it seems like okay, we fixed property taxes, and then not too long after we got to do something about property taxes, and, and that, now like one of his big ideas was to like just get rid of the school tax. Let there be no longer a school tax, no more property tax for your local ISDs. That's like the dumbest thing in the world. What is that how you make of it?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And he's not giving any answers for, well, how will public services, how will things continue to go on? Because we got to have money. I
Hmm.
mean, our city budget, our county budgets, we have to have funds. I mean, we can't just go without it. And so to take away that revenue stream and then act like magically things are just going to keep going, that's not how it works. I don't think he's concerned with being serious or having a plan that really would work because he hasn't done anything all this time and he keeps getting reelected. So why would you have to sit down and really come up with a serious plan if you know the same idiots are going to be voting for you again?
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned data centers earlier. How much of an issue is that in your part of the state? How excited, how angry, how anything are people feeling about data centers over there in East Texas?
Yeah, it's a big issue. Lufkin is about 15, 20-minute drive away. And they're going to have a data center in Angelina County. And it's been on the news. They've had a lot of meetings. People are upset about it. We have a solar farm that's getting put in right across the lake where I live. And people are upset. They were trying to, get enough people together to ask for a moratorium because they're
Mm,
concerned about the environment. So people are upset about that. And that's a lot of my Republican neighbors that's very upset about what's going on. But, the 89th legislative session, the Republican incumbent that I'm running against, they took power away from local authority to be able to, ask for a moratorium or pause the data centers. They gave that power to the state. And so when some of these people went to the Republican incumbent and was trying to get help, they couldn't get any help. And so I really don't think that they're going to do anything to stop the billionaire bros because
Yeah.
they're working for them.
Yeah. I found that, there was a recent poll that was just released, like maybe just a few weeks ago, where it found that most of the opposition comes from those who live in the rural and suburban areas. And it's interesting that because you mentioned it just a few moments ago that Governor Abbott is saying, "Hey, we need to not do this in the rural areas anymore." Gee, I wonder why. Like, do you like just because it might make some sort of a political sense, it doesn't mean it actually makes sense. So he was you probably remember the 2004 presidential campaign where they called John Kerry this big flip flopper. This is Abbott. I mean, this is the most flip-flopping thing that we've seen right before our eyes. And we don't have to look back too far to really find the evidence.
Right.
How angry do you think, what's the temperature of anger? I guess I mean, if you want to put it that way, if I want to put it that way, are you finding people when it comes to trying to not let these data centers come to your areas?
Yeah, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being very angry, I would say we're at an 8 because
Yeah.
people want it stopped. We're very concerned about our water, and we all know what's going on with Corpus Christi, and there's a couple of other areas in the state that's,
Mhm.
they're concerned that they're going to run out of water. And so, yeah, they're up in arms about it, and they should be. But I'm pretty sure Abbott has whispered to his billionaire donors, "Hey, I just got to say this to get elected, right? I don't mean it. I'm just gonna get out there and say I'm against the data centers, but after the election, if I win, yeah, I just keep doing what you've been doing." I'm pretty sure that the billionaires, are not, worried because now he's flip-flopping on what he
Yeah.
said about data centers.
Yeah. I, I don't find myself agreeing too much with Commissioner Sid Miller, who I like to call Boss Hog. Uh, but, 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 he actually said something that made me go, okay, now that makes sense because he's now against him. Of course, he lost his primary to a beekeeper, I think.
Mm,
No,
yeah.
yeah, he did. And so, so he's now on this little rampage, kind of like this revenge tour, saying, get rid of this. And it was just reported that even he wrote a letter to Abbott saying, call a special session, do something on that data
Mm,
center stuff right now. And because he was having the same ideas that you had, you can take care of it
yes.
today. So, but he's just being this little fumbling around, don't really want to do anything about it. I mean, I've never known this governor to be really milk toast about a lot of things unless he doesn't care about it. And I think you're right about what you said. Is this just something that he's just saying, and then later he's going to come back and be like, I didn't really mean that. And so
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
one of the reasons he can't come back.
Right. Well, another thing that's hilarious about Sid Miller is that Greg Abbott was against him. He was talking about how crooked he was, but yet he's for Ken Paxton. What? I That makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah. And then Sid
Yeah.
Miller, he was all for what everyone else was doing till he lost, just like John
Mhm.
Cornyn,
Yeah.
was talking about naming a major interstate after Trump and, just to try and win, but it didn't win. So, they're saying any and everything.
Just grasping for straws here. Um, so um, Any last things you'd like to mention here before we get out of here?
Yeah. I looked up all of the bills that Joanne Schaffner, the Republican incumbent for House
Mm,
District 11, um, wrote and that they passed into law. And I couldn't find anything that helped the working class. I couldn't find anything that helped poor people. I couldn't find anything that helped middle class. There was something about ambulance. I thought, well, okay, that might be, something that helps. But then as I read into it, it didn't do anything to, cut the cost. It helped the companies, which is good, but still do something to help the struggling people. We all at one time or another, didn't want to take a ride in an ambulance if we were ever that sick where we need to go to the ER, no, 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 so and so will drive me.
mm,
Well, what a shame that we have to say somebody's going to drive me to the emergency room because we don't want them calling for an ambulance. That's not the way it should be. And then, she also, wrote a bill and it was highly endorsed by Greg Abbott and it passed with flying colors, ivermectin. They call it medical
mm.
freedom. Well, ivermectin is a parasitic drug that's, great for cattle, horses, and now with this New World screwworm, it takes care of that, knocks that out really fast. But because some people said it helped me with COVID, now they don't have to go to the doctor, they don't have to get a prescription, just go straight to the pharmacy and get ivermectin. Well, you know how many people are sick with diabetes and high blood pressure? What about medical freedom, since that's what it's called? What about medical freedom for all the rest of the sick Texans? I'm like, I don't know what's behind that. It doesn't make sense to me because why would you care for just a certain group of people and everybody else can't get this medical freedom? So a lot of things that she has done is just, it's not good for East Texans. So we need to get her out of there and need to vote for
Awesome.
me, Roxanne Lathan.
There you go. How talk a little bit like how far does your district stretch? Like does it go east and west, north, south? What does it like kind of
Yeah.
look like?
Four of the six counties border Louisiana. So we are all the way east.
Okay.
There's Nacogdoches, Newton, Panola, Rusk, Sabine, and Shelby counties. So it covers a large area.
Okay. Awesome. I just put a, picture on that so that the viewer can see what your district looks like, and so that's what that is. I mean, that's literally out there, right on the border, and so I'm sure many people. Yeah, that just reminded me of something. Just, if you have just a couple of minutes to answer this, a lot of people will want to leave Texas to go like gamble, like maybe go to Louisiana or Arkansas. Out here in West Texas, they'll go to New Mexico, they'll go to Hobbs, they'll go to Clovis, or even up to the Oklahoma area to want to gamble. Well, what do you think about that? What do you make of wanting to legalize like casino gambling in our state?
Yeah, because of so many people saying that they're Christians, and we've seen that they support Ken Paxton and pedophiles. So I really don't understand that. But because they're Christians, they don't want gambling. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You cannot say this is against the Bible, this is wrong, or it's going to hurt our state. Um, and then on the other hand, you're okay with some of this really bad stuff that's going
Yeah.
on. So I'm for voting for gambling in our state. I know there's going to be people look down on that, but I really don't care.
No.
Um, we could use the money,
Hmm.
and I know that it may cause a lot of people to have to call that 1-800 Gambling Anonymous number, but when you go to Louisiana to go and gamble, and I have, you look in the parking lot, you will see more Texas license plates than anything else. So let's get real about what Texans really want.
Yeah.
Again,
Agreed.
that takes people caring enough to do the right thing for Texas.
Absolutely, and I totally on board with you on that. I'm all about it. You know, that's it's it. I think that's It's something that is inevitable, and it's kind of weird that we're like one of the last states in the union that doesn't allow it. I don't know, but I'm all like, hey, look, I'm not a big gambling person. All right, I'm it's not really who I am. If I do go into a area, I'll take like $100 with me and say, this is all I'm doing.
Yeah.
Win, lose, or draw. This is all I got. So, but that's rare. But I don't want them leaving the state to go give Oklahoma a better economy, or Arkansas, or Louisiana, or you get it. But I'm with you. Let's have it here. Roxanne, just at the end of this, tell us where people can find you, like on a social media. Where can they donate to you? Kind of tell us that, please.
Yeah, well, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, TikTok, YouTube, X. I'm everywhere. And just look for at Roxanne for HD11, or just Roxanne for the number four Texans.com. On my website, you can click on everywhere and see all the different social media handles. Just click on that, it'll take you everywhere. My Act Blue is set up on all of my social media sites. Also, Act Blue is what I use for donations. You can click on that also on my website. Again, Roxanne for the number four Texans.com. So everything is right there to make it easy for you. And if you want to volunteer, again, I have a Google form for you to just click on and tell me how you want to help me. And I've made it pretty easy for you.
Awesome. Roxanne, thank you so much for joining the Outsider Podcast. It's been great to have you here. You're welcome back anytime. You want to come back here in the next couple weeks or a month or something, just give me a holler and we'll make time for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been fun talking with you. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Folks, that is all from me today. A very special thank you to Mrs. Roxanne Lathan for joining me on this program. A great interview. Wish her all the best in her upcoming campaign. And also thank you, the viewer, the audience, for watching and or listening to the Outsider Podcast. Folks, I just want to make this clear. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, all right, all you have to do is shoot me an email at the.outsider806@gmail.com. That's the.outsider806@gmail.com. You can see it right here wherever I've placed it in my fingers or somewhere over here. This is mainly a political aspect here. Okay, this is mainly a political show. If you're wanting to talk about health or something like that, that's really not my area. But I have an open microphone policy. I'll talk to anybody on the political spectrum. If you have a talking dog, let's get Lassie on the show. But for real, you don't have to agree with me. You can disagree with me. We can have a very live conversation. I think that would be fun. But I also enjoy the respect that I have for my guests, and I'm always flattered that people even want to be on here. So again, if you or someone you know would like to be on the show and talk some politics with me, the.outsider806@gmail.com is the email you need to send that request. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much again for watching and or listening, and I'll see you again very, very soon.
The preceding analyses and opinions were that of Drew Landry and his alone. They did not necessarily reflect all of his podcast listeners or newsletter readers. Thank you for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Be sure to follow The Outsider on X and on Facebook. Also, don't forget to sign up to be a free subscriber to his newsletter on Substack. Just look for The Outsider. We will see you again next time.